Well, welcome back to the Church of Atheism Podcast. This is our second episode, or should I say part two, of our episode on the war on drugs. There's this one, and there's going to be a third one coming out early next week. I won't waste your time with all the intros we usually do. You know where to find us on Twitter and, Patreon. Patreon.com/Church of Atheism. Boom. Got it plugged in there. Anyway, I'm just going to start the episode. I hope you enjoy.
So the Harrison Act of 1914, I think officially put wow, I really should have taken more notes on the Harrison Act. That kind of seemed important, but
You got some, though. You brought it up.
yeah. So, as with opium, cocaine, that was also the same thing, but with black people.
Yep.
And cocaine. Well, and I guess sort of a Hispanic thing, because South Americans have been using the coca plant,
Right.
As a stimulant. They've been using it for thousands of years.
Right.
And but with cocaine, a lot of this started in the South, specifically New Orleans, and this was also around the time jazz became big, and
Makes
this is around the
sense.
time. Yeah, this is around the time when jazz kind of found a white audience, and that was no good. So with cocaine, we saw the same thing.
Right.
It was the dangers of jazz music, which they would also use against black people again with
Yep.
weed a decade or so later. But
It's unbelievable.
yeah. Well, and then the really fucked up thing is that a lot of these dock workers and laborers in the South and New Orleans is where a lot of this happened. But
Jesus.
so these managers and bosses, they would give for free, they would give their workers cocaine.
Right.
So that, and
Increased productivity.
yeah, it makes you talk constantly like a prick. So it's kind of ironic how, we introduce it was essentially white, business owners or whatever.
Right.
They introduced coke to black people and then pretty much blame them for everything that's bad about it.
Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah. So good old cocaine. And then so the next big prohibition is, of course, alcohol prohibition.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, went over really well.
Yeah, tremendously. Dude, people literally stopped drinking.
Right.
Nobody in the United States drank.
Nope. It was really
At all.
weird, but it worked amazingly well.
Yeah. And
There were
it's
no
remarkable.
gangs or anything.
No, nobody exploited any sort of loopholes.
Nope.
None of that.
Nope. Speakeasies didn't exist.
Yeah.
It all worked out fine.
How do people who support drug prohibition, how do they I don't know, it's just baffling to me how nobody seemed to take any notes from alcohol prohibition.
Nope.
No one.
It's the same fucking people who are always like, well, if you don't remember the past, it'll come back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah, exactly.
No, dumb fuck, you're the one not remembering.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's they only use that logic to apply to, justifying hating Muslim people.
Right.
Well, it's look, we didn't hate Muslims, until after 2001. Look what happened.
Right.
We gotta keep hating Muslims.
Should have hated them earlier.
Yeah, we should have hated them a long time ago, but no.
I told Steve to stop not hating them. Steve didn't listen.
He's like, now goddamn it, Clem, I'll open this Miller High Life and hate whoever I want.
Miller. It's a true high life.
Fucking Miller High Life. So yeah, alcohol.
By the way,
Oh,
just really quick, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're still not sponsored by Christian Mingle. I just wanted to throw that out there.
what?
Yep. Still hasn't happened.
That's why the promo code. Yeah, that's why the promo code didn't work.
Yep. Free anal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like I was saying last time, we just keep throwing out sponsors. One of them will stick.
Yeah, exactly. Tonight I'm drinking Red Bull.
Ah.
An energy drink. That's what it says right on the label.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I figured we're audio only, so I would talk about what it looks like.
Good idea, actually. Oh, now we got another cat joining.
Hello, kitten. You're on the air.
Yeah, this one never comes downstairs. Oh, now there's three of them. They're like surrounding me like raptors, and they're meowing at each other. Why they chose here and now to do that is I don't know.
Save us.
But like, so with like no, it's crazy with alcohol prohibition. It's like Al Capone is the most famous, probably criminal, really, like
Yeah.
in American history. I mean, there's like a lot of serial killers, but I feel like every citizen knows who Al Capone was.
Yeah.
And and everyone knows about him. Everyone knows why he's so famous. Everyone knows about Prohibition. I mean, they've made a ton of movies about it. There was
Right.
Boardwalk Empire. There was a smash hit HBO show specifically about why Prohibition was bad. The show started when Prohibition started, and the story ends when Prohibition ends. Like that's all it's about.
Right.
And,
Nope. No lessons learned.
and the thing is, like, another thing that people don't realize, like, hey, fucking stop it. God, they're fighting each other. Jesus. So, like,
For those of you just joining.
yeah. If you were in your car and you were changing the dial or just tuned in, I stopped a possible cat-on-cat homicide. A caticide is what they're called.
Yeah.
I learned that in Harvard Law.
Yep.
Prohibition.
Harvard, Nebraska, right?
Yeah, Harvard, Nebraska.
Yeah,
It's a town of I think 100 people.
Is it that many?
Yeah, maybe not. You could go there to score meth, or you could get your law degree.
Right.
It takes the same amount of time. I don't think it's accredited.
Nah. Hey, what you want, math or Harvard law degree?
Yeah, would you like math, or would you like a PhD? I chose both, just to be safe.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant move.
Yeah, but so yeah, like alcohol prohibition. What was that? 1980? Or was it 1920? I know it was like there was at least a couple good years where it was really building up, but a huge part of that was the temperance movement, which was, I don't know, like towards the beginning of the 20th century, there was like a huge kind of like religious reawakening. And like, I don't know, I was kind of reading about it, and it was called like, I don't know, like the American Enlightenment period or some shit, where like, yeah, religion started to be kind of become part of the mainstream again. Not like it ever wasn't part of the mainstream, but all of a sudden you had like this huge, huge growth of like religious-based movements and groups and philosophical things, and a huge part of that was like the temperance movement was essentially like religious women, like Catholic women were basically responsible. I don't know, like it's really weird how that was. I didn't really. That's kind of the thing I read about last, so I didn't get too much info on the actual temperance movement, but it was definitely religious based. And
we'll probably circle back at some point and do an episode on it.
Yeah, maybe we should. That would be a good one.
Because I've heard of that too, but I don't really know much. Like, I know pretty much nothing about it.
Yeah, all I know it was really like religious based, which is weird because like how alcohol prohibition actually happened is just it makes no sense because
Right.
everybody drank.
Yeah.
Like really, and I mean really until like probably like the 80s, like literally everybody drank all the time.
Right.
People drank on the job everywhere.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how. I still don't understand how it happened.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm gonna have to look into more. And then like another thing about that people also don't realize is that prohibition, like that's basically how the mafia grew into like the large syndicate that it remained until like maybe kind of like the early 90s.
Right.
But when prohibition ended, like that actually like that's when the mafia really grew. And
that was the spark it needed.
yeah, and like after alcohol prohibition, all that really happened is that I'm sure there was a lot of gangsters and shit and crime groups that were put out of business, but like every single major mafia family, all that happened is they switched from alcohol to heroin. So like they went from one prohibition to exploiting another, and for some reason the second one they exploited really didn't seem to get that much attention. And that's because heroin was never a mainstream thing.
Right.
And it really just affects
small
heroin
users.
Yeah, and those are probably going to be either non-whites or poor people.
Right.
So it's
people who aren't
amazing how,
voting.
yeah, exactly. And people who at that time couldn't vote, really.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. I didn't mean like they were fucking lazy bastards. Didn't mean that, people.
So, yeah, so that's kind of interesting to think about. Is actually in the 40s they made a significant amount more money than they did during alcohol prohibition because they already had like trade routes established, and they already had like countrywide connections, and
they had the business. They just changed the supply and demand.
Yeah, and there was nothing about heroin that really caught the mainstream media's attention, so nobody really gave a shit about the mafia then, and that's really what turned it into a monster. And if they could have thought about drug prohibition, that would have never happened.
Yep. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and then so that brings me to 1932. So this is kind of interesting. I was reading about how Franklin Roosevelt, old FDR, he was elected president in 1932, and he pretty much won, basically because he promised to end prohibition. During the campaign trail, he said he would end it, and that is like a significant reason why he got elected into office.
Yeah, that's. I'm short of words tonight.
Yeah, like so it's kind of funny how like this law was so not respected. It was so not respected that the president got elected because of it.
I feel like that's all one president or presidential nominee needs to do today with weed.
Yeah.
If someone would just go and say, I will make the drug prohibition go out the window, I feel like they'd be elected in a heartbeat.
That's the gross part, is that it probably would still be like career suicide in politics.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean,
would, at least on like a presidential level.
Right. If you don't get voted in, you're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if somehow it doesn't win, you don't have a career anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, ridiculous. So yeah, there's FDR. Then 1937 is when that was when the first official marijuana prohibition came, and it's the exact same pattern as the Chinese and the black people thing, which is
Yep.
where it was mostly brought over by Mexican day laborers, and instead of like a lot of these people, instead of you know after working insane hours in terrible conditions with next to no money, at the end of the day, they would relax with weed because it would,
Right.
calm them down
Right.
and, just relax the body when you're probably just achy as shit.
Right.
Instead of, they could have just went home and got drunk and then realized that their life's a mess and just beat their family. But no, they chose to, be a little more responsible.
Right.
So it's up to us white people to take that away, which we did promptly.
Of
And
course.
so the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's fucking stupid. So like, what it is you could get marijuana, but you have to have a tax stamp which proved that you paid tax on the marijuana. And so if you have the marijuana tax stamp, it's legal to possess it. But in order to get it, you have to bring in marijuana to show them, which you would be in possession of, which was
Right.
illegal.
Right. So, just here you go. Handcuff me.
And then it wasn't until the 60s when Timothy Leary, the fucking whack job LSD guru guy,
Right.
he actually was the one that took that law to court. And so
Really?
because they were like, yeah, it's self-incrimination. Like
Right.
that's
We could do
pretty
that.
unconstitutional.
Right.
So then they just compromised by just making it outright illegal.
Ta-da!
Yeah. But like so, and this is when it kind of starts to go. It kind of you think it's kind of conspiracy theory territory, but it was very much. This is well documented. Like, in addition to racism, this is when you start getting big business interfering with public policy, which is
Yep.
so. In like the 30s, there was the potential to make commercial hemp became real.
Yep.
And so there was a huge, campaign of like, oh, this would be better, more efficient, less pollution if we just made hemp paper. Well, William Randolph Hearst, who he had something of a monopoly on, the United States newspaper
Yep.
industry. And he also, as a smart business move, and since he owned the newspapers, he also decided to buy the paper mills and the timber and lumber companies that provide the wood to make the paper. So
Right.
obviously, hemp, that's going to be a huge problem business-wise.
Yep. Especially because it's better quality than paper.
Yeah,
Or wood paper,
Yeah.
I should say.
yeah.
So, he was fucked.
You get 5 times more paper from an acre of hemp than you would an acre of trees.
Wow.
5 times more. And
Yeah.
if you're in a place like California where you can grow it year round, you're gonna have like at least 2 to 3 yields like
Oh,
a year.
Right.
So that was gonna affect his bottom line. So
Massively. Like, not like competition. It would have put him out of business.
yeah, it probably would have. Or it would have at least, God forbid, turned him from a billionaire into a millionaire.
Fucking slacker.
I mean, would you, how embarrassing is that?
Yeah.
To be a millionaire?
You're not even a billionaire anymore, bruh.
Oh.
Do you even billion, bruh?
Do you even billion? If my wife told me that she was actually a millionaire instead of a billionaire, I'd push that bitch into the snow.
Yep.
Wouldn't think twice about it.
How dare you, man?
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty much that, and all it took for him was since he owned the newspaper companies, he could print any goddamn thing he wanted. So
Yep.
that was the era of
Fear.
oh yeah, just insane Oh, you can find these online too. They're so ridiculous. Of like,
Local man
man
smokes
murders.
weed.
Yeah, man high on marijuana murders his whole family with an axe. That
Right.
is an honest to God headline that I saw in one of these like old newspaper things.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, this is actually shit that happened in our country
Oh,
not
and
that
the
long ago.
yeah, in the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act, it passed due to testimony that marijuana causes criminality, insanity, and death.
Jesus, it escalated.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that only one of those things is true, which is criminality, and the only reason that is because,
Weed's
well,
illegal.
it actually didn't happen until after they passed that law.
Right.
So
The
yeah,
only law they're breaking was smoking the weed to begin with.
yeah. The
No
only
other laws were committed
yeah,
or
the only
broken.
the only true part about that is the criminality, which is something they caused because of their
Right.
stupid law.
It's unreal.
So yeah, you got the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act, and then like not too much happens in regards to like laws until like the 60s, because like I said, I think, yeah, I can't remember. I want to say it was 1966 maybe when the marijuana tax stamp law was overturned. But so the 60s, that is when the real when the actual war on drugs as we know it. That's when the phrase was started.
Right.
And it doesn't take a genius to realize that. So the war on drugs, that was a phrase coined during the Nixon administration, and it doesn't take a genius to realize he was using his phony war on drugs to distract the citizens from his war in Vietnam,
Yep.
which
Which
he
was
loved.
drug fueled.
Yeah, yeah. That was like the second big like heroin like kind of there was kind of like like heroin crisis like in a lot of places in the 40s and 50s, but it wasn't until after the Vietnam War, or like during and after, that we had a huge influx of troops coming home and being addicted to heroin
Right.
because that's what
They got
that's
over
what
there.
yeah. And not only that, you could go into, I don't know, kind of conspiracies. There's a lot of stuff that proves it, but the CIA more than likely, on several occasions, traded drugs for guns to
Yep.
fund various things. So,
Yep.
yeah, so the Nixon administration, yeah, that was okay. And then I got an interesting quote, and I wrote the whole thing down too, because
Yeah.
I have a bad problem with paraphrasing things, and then I'll be like, yeah, we'll put a link up to that so you could read the actual quote. And then I always
And then
forget.
now, never.
Yeah, yeah. So, so and this is actually pretty fascinating. So there's this guy, John Ehrlichman, and he was Richard Nixon's domestic policy chief. So he was actually with Nixon from day one. He was with him on the campaign trail. He was one of the first White House people staffed under the Nixon administration. And so, wait, hold on a second. I gotta take a vape puff real quick.
Gotcha.
Yep, there we go. There we go. Now I'm back to where I need to be. Oh, that was I got my new that was my new heroin vape.
Yeah,
By the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
'cause, you know.
Oh shit! Hold on. I just unplugged my headphones. Fucking loud. Yeah, I heard they were just coming out with those. The heroin vapes.
Yeah, I'm beta testing them. It's great.
Yeah. What do you think so far? Better than the original?
I'm really itchy.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that bad?
No, that just means it worked and I need more.
Right. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So yeah, So John Ehrlichman, Nixon's domestic policy chief. Okay, so here's his full quote. It says, this actually came from an interview he did, I think, with like CNN in I want to say like 2006 or maybe even 2016. It was really recent.
Right.
And so he said, here's the quote. It says, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. And then he continues to say, we knew we couldn't make it illegal to be against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate marijuana with hippies and blacks with heroin.
Right.
So yeah, that was their tactic. He hated black people and hippies, so they aggressively made it their business, to get hippies associated with weed, blacks with heroin, and then he goes on to say, we do that, and then criminalizing both heavily. Doing that, we could disrupt these communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, etc., etc. Yep. Yeah, so this is an actual a higher-ranking staff member saying this.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty, gross. In 1971 was when the phrase "war on drugs" is first used.
Man.
And
it's been gone for a long time.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. Here's actually something. This surprised the shit out of me. During the Nixon administration, that was the only time in U.S. history where the majority of anti-drug federal funding went to treatment instead of went to penalizing people.
Right.
But under Nixon, that surprised the shit out of me.
Yeah, that's very surprising.
And it's kind of funny. He's recognized as almost kind of like a supervillain at this point. Like, he's an evil guy, and yet he had more empathy, at least towards drug users, than any president after that.
Yep. I had no idea about that.
No, I had to, I didn't believe it. That's why I had to make sure to fact check that one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So then, they're fucking fighting again. So then, around that time, pretty much since, I think, the Federal Bureau of Drugs turned into the DEA in 1972. That's when we saw the DEA.
Our friends.
And, our friends. And, here's the thing I was reading is that in the early 70s, a lot of people in the government, people in the government that were related to the science and the health community, during the early 70s, actually a lot of these people were starting to change their attitudes about weed and really wanted to do research on the potential benefits. And then by 1974 that was just done. Yep. Whoever people in the government pretty much got rid of those people, or you could fire free thinkers and replace them with people who are going to agree with you.
Yep, pretty fucking easily.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that more in the last 2 years than we have probably ever.
No shit, dude.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I hope I don't get too far off subject here, but I've said this before, but this is just amazing to watch. I'm getting more and more like George Carlin when I'm watching this Trump administration. We're just witnessing so much fucking random history. We were here for this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is the craziest fucking president we've ever had, and we're alive to see it. How amazing is that?
And that really is just bonkers to kind of sit and think about.
We've had great presidents. We've had, controversial presidents. We've had presidents change the way America was. They did so well or so good, and this guy is just fucking batshit crazy.
Oh, I know, it's crazy. Even George Bush, who, it's kind of funny. We've even talked about this on the show, but because I hated him so much, and just because of how he compares to Trump, I really started getting a lot of sympathy.
Yeah.
Until I started researching for this article, and I'm like, oh yeah, he was a piece of shit. Yeah. So, yeah. So,
R.I.P. Barbara.
oh yeah, Babs. So between 72 and the mid 80s, not a lot happened with the laws. Actually, this is interesting. So, the Netherlands, they decriminalized weed in 1976, and the kind of funny thing about that is that was it 76? Yeah, I think it was. So, in 1976, they decriminalized weed, which was remarkably progressive,
Right.
especially for that time. But so when the year they decriminalized it, youth cannabis use was at 10%. 10% of people under 18 used weed, and within a decade, when they decriminalized it, there was a very, very brief spike in teen use, which I mean it's gonna happen, but by 10 years later, by 1985, it fell to 6%. So right there, that really shows you a lot. Right. It really says a lot.
Almost half.
Yeah. It went down by almost half. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, I mean, really, until even when we were in high school, there was sort of a social stigma around pot. It's
oh, for sure.
Smoking it is a sort of an act of rebellion, and when people...
I was in that camp, to be honest. I was the dipshit that was in that camp.
Oh, I was for quite a while. I really was until because out of the people I hung out with at the time, I was the last one to try it, and then the only reason I did is because I hung out with them on several occasions where they did it, and I'm like, oh, they're the same as they were before.
Right.
Right. Now they giggle a little bit more, and they want to go to Burger King.
Right. Really bad.
Yeah. That was, and then see, that's the thing. That is the true gateway. When you find out you are being lied to your entire life, especially about weed.
Right.
So you find out that's bullshit. So then how do people expect kids to believe anything else about any other? Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem, I think, is the people who had the chance to really separate good versus bad drugs, they just never did. Does that make sense?
Oh shit, you kind of broke up there. Say that again.
Oh, so the people back who were making all these drugs illegal, they had a chance to actually separate the stigma from good drugs versus bad drugs.
Oh yeah.
I have zero fucking interest in doing anything like heroin or cocaine. I don't have any interest in doing those things at all.
Yeah.
They had the chance, but instead they had to go the other route where it's all bad, it's all terrible.
Yeah.
You can't have any of it.
Anything that I know about drugs is none of the stuff I learned at school. It's what I've either tried firsthand or I've seen, in behavior that I've seen, or I read about it in actual reputable news sources or some shit,
Right.
Anything I know about drugs, that was research that I did on my own time.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then another thing with decriminalization or legalization or whatever, there's absolutely nothing rebellious about. There's nothing cruel and rebellious about doing what your parents do.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was with the Amsterdam and the Netherlands thing. That was actually one of the. That was a big theory, and a lot of kids that say it. Like, why don't you want to try pot? Like, well, that's not cool. That's what my parents do.
Right.
It's gay.
That's true. I never really thought about that, but that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a whole, like, no matter what, you're, like, kids and even a lot of adults, like, they just want to do the opposite of what they're told. Just for the sake of rebelling.
Right.
So if you teach them properly and you treat it like
effort.
you treat it like alcohol or anything else, any regulated substance, all of a sudden it loses a lot of its appeal.
Yep. So that's going to finish off part 2 of the War on Drugs episode. Part 3, like I said, should be up early next week, the next couple days, actually. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We really do enjoy it. Loving the feedback we're getting from you guys. I really do appreciate it. We will talk to you guys next time.